Just give us an idea of the types of conversations that you've had with regulators over the past few months as we got to that moment last week where we saw that the SEC is paving the way for approval.
Yes, and thanks so much for having me. Over the last few months, most of us thought that this was dead in the water, that the spot Ether ETF applications were going to be ignored because there were no signs of life, really. So I think that's why you saw very low percentages in approval. What we've seen in the last 2 weeks is really a tectonic shift emanating from Washington around the dialogue with regard to crypto. And that's where we saw last week the approval order come over, and you saw the public filings on the what's known as the 19b4 side of the House, showing that there is, in fact, life out there for these products, which is great to see. Couple that with the movement we've seen in both houses of Congress, and it's really great to see this much momentum behind looking at both market structure and a repeal of a pretty questionable staff accounting bulletin that was anti-crypto at heart.
Well, just to meditate on the spot Ether conversation a little bit longer, I think a lot of people were shocked to see this turnaround. I mean, like you said, people were looking at this pretty much as dead in the water. A lot of folks, especially on Twitter, have said that this was entirely political. This was a politically motivated change. I'm curious for your take on that and what actually did change that we did have this reversal.
I would absolutely agree that some political wins headed in and helped in the crypto direction. I think in a presidential election year where you have two candidates who the boomer lines are probably pretty defined, but both of them are looking at what's going to move the voter. And it's become clear that crypto, believe it or not, is going to be a factor in this election. You saw Trump come out really strong over the weekend, making very pro-crypto statements. And now if one of them can grab that crypto brass ring, it's really going to help them in those swing states where crypto becomes more of a factor. So I do think that political wind is really impacting the views the candidates are taking. And if you also just look at the tenor of the message that the Biden administration sent prior to the repeal of SAB 121, it was a threatened veto. And we'll see if that takes place, because May 28th is the big day to see whether the Biden administration goes through with that. Compare that to the staff administration policy that was released prior to the vote on FIT 21. The language was much more, we're going to work with the crypto industry. It was still opposed, but it wasn't as threatening as we saw in the language that came out with the pre-veto statement prior, just a week earlier.
Which of the mainstream political candidates, in your opinion, are better for the crypto industry? Is it current President Joe Biden or former President Donald Trump?
Well, currently, if you look back in time from now, the Republicans have been much friendlier to crypto. The Republicans have taken the tact of, we're pushing business offshores, we need to keep this business onshore, and that is 100% correct, because we not only lose businesses, but we also can create a national security issue by pushing all of this business offshore. As a former federal prosecutor, I can tell you it's much harder to look into these businesses and to find out what's going on if they're not on our shores. But if we can see a movement in the Democratic side, if there's more of an embrace of crypto, that could also move in positive direction. So historically, it's been a much friendlier crypto stance that we're seeing from the Republican Party, but that could shift depending on who comes into the various roles that are key for policymaking in the U.S.
And it'll be fascinating to see how these conversations intensify as we get closer and closer to November. But just to talk about this bill that was passed in the House last week, I mean, what are the odds of it actually becoming law, though?
Unfortunately, the odds are low. We're losing daylight on hours in Congress because of its election year. So we don't have that much more time before the end of the year. But stranger things have happened. It could be tagged on to other bills. But I think the important aspect is that we're seeing bipartisan movement towards embracing the fact of the need for market structure. We've had enough of this CFTC versus SEC capture the flag jurisdictional bingo. We need to move forward and actually delineate who's in charge. We need to set out simple things like definitionally how we define different aspects of digital asset. And we have to stop relying on case law that was around and made when Biden was a toddler. So it's time now to move forward with market structure. And what we're seeing is an embrace across both sides, both parties, of that necessity. And that in and of itself is a win.